Is it now advisable to only build a branded tier 1 network and build backlinks to the properties as opposed to a 3-tiered approach using a branded ring and 2 persona rings? I'm not sure if Google updates flagged the 3-tier approach. Thanks, Vito. Vito, yeah, I mean, for years I've been teaching that I did not like to use the 3-tiered approach, or it was actually a 2-tiered network, right? There was the primary network, and then there was a second tier that had 3 networks. The way that I developed it years ago was a 2-tiered network had 4 syndication rings. There was the primary branded ring with 3 persona rings, that each of the 3 persona rings were triggered off of Blogger, Tumblr, and WordPress, respectively, right? So syndication ring number 1, or persona ring number 1, was triggered off Blogger. Persona ring number 2 was triggered off Tumblr. Persona ring number 3 was triggered off WordPress.com. But the branded ring was triggered off of YouTube and or the money site RSS feed, right? And that's called a 2-tiered network. And I've been teaching for years that I did not prefer or even recommend a 2-tiered network for money site syndication, for money site content syndication. You can do it, but it was a pain in the ass, because at tier 2, you should have also included other RSS feeds besides just the money site feed. Or at tier 2, it was the Blogger, Tumblr, or WordPress.com feed, but it was exclusively content that originated from the money site, and if that makes sense. So in other words, if you're using a 2-tiered network, the persona rings, which is tier 2, they would be, they should have other content in the same topical categories published on those blogs, but from other sources. Otherwise, it's a clear footprint that was being used for manipulating search results, right? It's fine to do 2-tiered networks in as many tiers as you want for YouTube syndication. Google doesn't care about YouTube syndication. In fact, you're acting as a publisher for Google. So that's why we never, ever experience any sort of negative effect from stacking multiple tier 1 syndication networks to the same channel, or multiple tier 2 networks, or in some cases, and some of our former members have actually done like multi-tiered networks, like seriously out 6, 8, 10 tiers. That's a management nightmare. I mean, God bless them for building all that and maintaining it. But if something breaks down in a complicated network like that, it takes forever to troubleshoot where the breakdown is, because there's so many moving like pieces. This is why I didn't like it. I like simplicity as much as possible, right? So, but with YouTube, it never mattered. Like, you could stack as many tier 1 networks on the same channel as you wanted, or as many tier 2 networks, or even add additional tiers if you wanted. And that was never an issue. But with money sites, if you were only using the content from your money site as syndication to a 2-tier network, and that was it, then the persona rings were clearly for manipulation purposes. It's fine to republish your own content to a branded ring, because it's your own content and you're already citing the source, right? Which is because it's your content. So that's fine. But what about the persona networks at tier 2? Like, it's unnatural for a person in the wild to only share content from one source, and that's it. Like, that's clearly being used for manipulating search results. And so that's a footprint. That is not a good footprint. That's a bad footprint, right? That's not an entity footprint. If it was, those would all be branded rings. That is a footprint. Again, we talked about persona networks at tier 3 as opposed to branded. Branded is tier 1, or I said tier 3, I meant tier 2. Branded ring is tier 1. Persona rings are tier 2 in the in what you were asking, right? And so branded properties is fine. It's fine to do that. You want to expand your footprint, but non-branded properties, you don't want a footprint. And that having a 2-tiered network for syndication of money site content it leaves a footprint at tier 2, unless, and what I was saying was, even at tier 2, if you splice in or add additional triggers from other RSS feeds that are related, topically relevant content, that's how you can start to populate the persona rings syndication networks with other content from other sources. Still should be topically relevant, but therefore you're still not eliminating your footprint, but you're significantly reducing it, because now your content, your original content from your money site, is among a lot of other posts on the persona networks. It's in the midst or among a lot of other content that is also related in the same topical categories, but it's from other sources. Does that make sense? Which would be a lot more natural, because somebody that's interested in a particular topic is going to find content in that topic from various sources. It's not usually going to be just from one source. So you just got to think about it logically, guys. That's the whole point. So I didn't like to use two-tiered networks on money site stuff because it becomes a pain in the ass to manage. Remember, you don't have control over other people's RSS feeds. So sometimes, and I've seen this happen, where if you're using other people's RSS feeds to populate persona networks with content from other sources, sometimes something will happen with their RSS feed, and all of a sudden your syndication network gets hit with like 50 posts in one day because something funky happened with their RSS feed and you have no control over it, and it triggered syndication over and over and over again. Sometimes duplicate posts over and over and over and over again. Next thing you know, your syndication network properties are terminated or suspended for spam. And it wasn't your fault. It was an RSS feed that was somebody else's feed that you were using to populate content. That's why I said, I didn't like to do it. I said, YouTube networks, I'll do it all day long, multiple tiered networks. But for money site stuff, I like to stick with just a branded network and then just power up that branded network. Right. That's the way that I've done it for years. It's a really good question.